to the official CABSAT podcast powered by Northtelecom. Joining me now is Pierre Carnet, who is the managing director at Massive Music.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and Massive Music.
Sure, I'll give you a bit of background. So my name is Pierre. I manage the Massive Music Middle East office, which is based out here in Dubai. And basically what Massive Music does is we're the world's leading music agency for brands. So our specialization is in everything that has to do with brand, sound, and music. We do things like compose or license music for advertising, audio branding, how to create music strategies and recognizable sound for brands, immersive sounds for events and activations, all the way down to things like creating sounds for apps or products that people love. I think a lot of listeners or people who might see this podcast will be familiar with our work, even if they're not familiar with us.
Yeah.
An example I can give, for example, is we created the sound of TikTok, which anyone who uses social media will recognize. The little hit and the melody. That's my best sort of a cappella impression that I can do of it. So that's the kind of space that we operate in. And as Massive Music Dubai, we work with all brands across the region, whether it's in the UAE, in Saudi, and sort of the wider GCC and MENA region.
Okay. Sounds like a very interesting place to work, I'd say.
It is, yeah, it's fun. We get to talk about music all day, so I'm not complaining.
All right. So why is music and sound necessary for brand communication?
So this is a really good question. Obviously, it's something that's necessary because most brands produce content, produce events, have a lot of touch points where they need music and sound. But beyond this, it's actually very, very important. There's a lot of data that shows that brands that don't use music or use music inappropriately will actually damage their image, will lose relationships and emotional connections with their audience, and miss out on a lot of opportunity to be recognized and to stand out. A big part of what we do is explaining to brands and agencies that work for them that music and sound are a very powerful tool to create recognition, to create recall, and to really connect with their audience. Music is something that's fundamentally very emotional. Everyone loves music, everyone has their own taste, but everyone loves music and everyone loves good music. And so for brands, using music strategically and using qualitative music is a great way to really create those connections with your audiences, not only in advertising, but also in things like products or apps, for example. The notification sounds that you get from your apps are a way to create messaging and basically create interaction. If you get, a notification on WhatsApp, you'll recognize that sound. It creates an action for you. And also it's part of the brand identity, right? It creates something that's recognizable and that has a value for the brand intrinsically. So this is the platform that we actually work with, which is working with brands to make sure that the music that they use, which they have to use anyway, they have content and so on that requires music, is not only an accessory, but actually goes beyond that and becomes a tool to really create emotional value and brand value with their customers.
Okay, great. And how are new technologies such as AI impacting the music industry? And do you believe that these technologies will eventually take over the industry? Because I know now there's like different AI tools that will come up with like little jingles for you and all that. So how is it really impacting?
Sure. So this is the topic of the moment, generative music with AI, creating music with AI, and the wider ecosystem of AI tools that's available to creators. My personal opinion and experience is that the tools that are coming up now are really opportunities for our space rather than a threat or something that's going to replace us. At the moment, the product development stage, let's say, of AI generated music is at a relative level of advancement, but still far from being mature. Probably we will start getting into a more mature space within the next couple of years. This means that right now there are tools available where you can type in, make me a happy electronic music beach tropical song, and it will pump out an original piece of music based on that brief. However, the quality of that music is still not comparable with something that's being made by a human composer or human music producer. This being said, give it a year or two and we will probably get to that point where we have comparable quality in music. However, when it comes to brands, part of the challenge for brands is, of course, obtaining the music and creating it, where AI tools will help significantly. But a big part of the challenge is also knowing what they want and actually having that strategic application and make sure that the music that you're using and creating is qualitative, but also relevant to your brand and furthering your interest and differentiating from your competitors. And so this is the part where actually the human element is still very, very relevant in terms of what we do, because as the music experts, we're actually able to advise brands on how to create the music and what kind of music they need that's actually going to build value for them, which you can't really have just with a generative tool. Beyond this, AI actually opens up a lot of opportunities for creators and for brands. There are a lot of composers and artists out there that are starting to use it to get better voice performances or come up with ideas for melodies or for rhythms or to help with mixing their music or create arrangements. It also opens up a lot of opportunities for new and different ways to use branded music. So for example, brands can create interactive music using AI. You create a bass track or have some branded sounds. Coca-Cola did this recently and launched an application that does this, where you have all this sort of recognizable sounds of Coke, but then the audience using AI can create their own versions of the music without necessarily needing to be experienced music composers themselves. So there's actually a lot of opportunity in terms of creation and interactivity, rather than what a lot of people see as being a threat to the industry and to what we do.
Okay. I guess you answered my next question as well in this. How can brands leverage generative music tools in the future of brand building and efficient communication? So I guess I'll jump into my last question is, how can governments and organizations tackle the future challenges of generative music? So eventually you said it will become similar, of the same standard as a real composer. So how can governments and organizations work together to sort of protect this industry?
So this is the number one challenge at the moment. The tech is running and developing. The only thing that is required to further the tech is just time to be able to train algorithms and train tools to create better music. But this is already well on its way. The challenge is the legislative framework and the infrastructure around creating music and using music through AI. A lot of sort of early startups that dealt in the generative music space are having a lot of problems now because they obviously need material to train their algorithms to create music. They need to learn. And that material, often they will just go and find on Spotify or on sort of general music platforms, and they will use, music by Drake or David Guetta to train their algorithms. The problem with that is that that music is owned by someone else. It's copyrighted, it's protected. There are rights holders for every single one of these songs, and the laws protecting that music are very, very strict, because this is also how we create intrinsic value for music, is by protecting it. Right now, a lot of the legislation is not really up to date in terms of protecting that music. So the conversations have to kind of flex around what's existing to be able to protect it in this new context. But as we go forward, this is the big conversation for the music industry, which is how do we make sure that we can actually protect that music from basically just being copied and extrapolated by AI tools. So there are a lot of conversations that have started on the legislative level, which basically focus around how do we use image rights, how do we protect voice, how do we protect not only the existing intellectual property of music, but also of an artist themselves when it comes to it being used by AI. Because, it's not only about creating music that has been trained through algorithms and been trained on other existing pieces of music, but it's also about protecting the image of the artists themselves. There was a story a couple of months ago where a song was released by Drake with Drake performing, doing the lyrics, all of it, but Drake had no part in actually creating this piece of music. It was entirely trained on existing Drake music. And so this not only is a financial threat for artists, because, you know, you can have people who are creating music that's not yours, but there's also a big image issue, absolutely, because you lose control over what your voice is. And so this is the number one sort of issue right now in progression in this field, and something that makes global labels and companies like Massive Music actually quite wary to experiment too much in this space, because right now the laws around it are still a little bit blurry, and you know, we don't want to be creating something that a year down the line will cause some trouble. Exactly. Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you so much. It's definitely an interesting topic, and there's a lot more to discuss, especially when it comes to AI. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And we wish you a successful show.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Yumna, and I hope you have a great rest of the podcast today.
Thank you.
All right.